Welcome everybody. So we're going to quickly call this meeting to order and introduce. We have some introductions to do, which we'll do in just 1 minute. But I want to make sure that everybody's been able to review and approve the agenda for today. Any additions? Anything that anybody wants to talk about? Excellent. Any public comments that need to be addressed or discussed? That as a no, which is great, and I'll hand it to Savannah to
Thank you.
begin introductions, please.
Just as a reminder for folks on the screen and in the room, I'm Savannah Haskell. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. We have a new board member here today, put her on the spot, and we're going to go around and do introductions, and then we'll sort of end leading over to that same sorry. So if I may pass the baton to the board, sir. Welcome.
Mike Holbert with HP Cummings.
Yeah.
Good morning, Phil Coling with Serve Vermont, the State Service Commission.
Morning, everyone. I'm the Deputy Secretary of the agency.
Mark Desrow, President of Desrow Teams. Eric Martins, Public Building. Jeremy White, Riverbend Career Tech Center.
Jay Bell, and the President and CEO of Core Power.
Savannah.
Hi everyone, I'm Betsy Fan. I'm the Director of Nursing Education and Professional Development at the Medical Center. I'm in Burlington. Excited to be here. I've done a lot of work with nursing workforce development, also with ACP.
Oh, I'm Allison Clarkson, Senator from Windsor District, Chair of Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs.
Morning, folks. I'm Drake Turner, the Deputy Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development.
And I'm Ronnie Benson, the Executive Director at Vermont for Women.
Then we'll head to the screen and I don't know, pick on you first, Ruth.
Good morning. I'm Ruth Durkee. I'm the State Director of Career Technical Education at the Agency of Education. I'm here today as the representative for Secretary Saunders.
Bill Cunningham, Regional Director, Tri-Valley Transit, Addison Region.
See?
Guess I'll go next. I'm Becky Capsalis. I'm the AVP of Talent Acquisition for the UVM Health Network and work closely with Betsy Hassan. Welcome, Betsy.
Right above you, Betsy Bailey.
Betsy Bailey from Little Dippers Doodle in St. Johnsbury, Vermont.
Tiffany.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tiffany Walker, and I oversee workforce at BTSU and CCV.
Aaron.
Hi, I'm Aaron Tomlinson. I'm the Assistant Superintendent at the Hartford School District.
And Rob Terry is just joining us. Good morning, Rob.
Morning.
We're doing introductions. Would you like to say who you are?
I can do that. I'm Rob Terry. I'm the Executive Director of Merck Forest down in southwestern Vermont and Rupert. So we manage about 3,500 acres here, sustainable farms, sustainable forest, and do a fair bit of collaboration with local high schools and colleges and universities to do career track exploration work in both sustainable forestry and farm work.
Did I get all of our board members on the screen? Did I leave anybody out? Don't think I did. Okay. Sure, I'll let you take that one.
Okay. So we see some other folks have joined us. We want to give folks a chance to identify themselves as well. So going around the screen, I see Sarah Montrol.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I am with Nova Consulting Group. We've worked with the Vermont Department of Labor over the summer, and I'm here to just listen in on any other opportunities for workforce development in the area.
Great, welcome. Robin.
Good morning. I'm Robin Castle. I'm the State Director of Adult Education and Literacy with the Agency of Education. And I'm here in case there are any questions about adult education and literacy in Vermont. And also I'd be available after the meeting. If people had questions, feel free to email me or reach out.
Haley, you're next on my screen.
Good morning, Haley Turner, lawyer. I work for Economic Services here at the state of Vermont, and I'm the program manager for our SNAP Employment and Training Program.
Thanks for joining us. All right, David Justice is next on my screen.
Morning, everybody. David Justice, Associate Director with Vermont Adult Learning and oversee our workforce development programming. Also here just to learn, to listen how we can support the state's workforce goals. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining. Rowan, you're the last one on my screen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. I'm Rowan Hawthorne. I'm the policy director at the Department of Labor. Here to
We can't hear you, Rowan.
I can. Can you hear me?
Barely.
I'm not sure what's going on.
Now you're very
Any better?
garbled, but we know you're there.
Okay.
We see you.
Okay, great. Great.
Thanks, Rowan. If you get into a better, it sounds like maybe you're in a bad zone or maybe there's a weird connection, so we can touch base with you later, but thank you for joining. And Rowan's the Director of Policy for the Department of Labor. And then I see we have a guest in the room too. Suzanne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Suzanne Feblaney, Managing Director of Community Services.
We're gonna see my chats as they come in. So it's really professional today.
Okay, we all set?
I think we are.
So let's move to approving the minutes. That everybody get and review the minutes from the last meeting. Any questions, comments, concerns? Great, we get a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion.
I'm sorry, second. Right, all in favor? Any opposed? Excellent.
Anybody on the screen?
But I asked.
We did it.
Yeah, I opened it.
Okay. All right, sorry.
Easier.
She's a real star.
Yeah, be sharp by you. Why don't we hand it over to Drake for discussion on the updated goals? But actually, before we do, if I can just quickly give an update. So many of you are going to wonder why we're doing this again. When we went to the executive committee and brought this up, there was some clarification required, and they wanted a little bit more depth and some direction on where we were going with the goals and what we were doing. And so they advised a couple of adjustments to be made. I think more just clarification than anything else. So that's why we're bringing it back to discuss a little bit more thoroughly. But I didn't want anybody to think that, oh, all the work that was done is just now being dismissed and we're moving on to something different. We're not. It's just clarification and digging down a little bit deeper into what was already done.
And improve.
Excuse me?
And improve.
Oh, well, that's the goal. All of them. So anyway, Jake, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so in your board packets, you have a lot of documents that talk about our goals. So the first thing you all should have, whether you're in person or virtual, excuse me, I'm gonna just admit this for a second. So as Jay said, at the September meeting, we approved an initial list of 4 sort of more policy oriented goals and then 1 more operational goal for the board. And since that time, the executive committee had a discussion and decided before breaking into subcommittees, they want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what sort of like the next level of those goals are, to be really clear about, you know, what are some potential expected outcomes, activities, metrics to get just even a little bit more specific, as Jay mentioned, about what these goals really mean. And our hope is coming out of this conversation, y'all will have an opportunity to review the work that the executive committee has done since September and provide any input. We're hoping that the board will consider voting again to approve these goals, because now that there has been more work done on them, we want to bring them to you all again for approval. And following that, hopefully we are going to get to the point where we want to divide into subcommittees and provide board members the opportunity to indicate which of these goals they're really interested on digging a little bit deeper into. And then the hope is in 2026, we can have some subcommittees meeting, potentially every other month, and then reporting back to the board at full board meetings so that we can dig a little bit deeper into sort of the nitty gritty of these goals. So with that said, I think we wanted to go through each of these 4 updated goal drafts. And our hope is that the folks who worked, it was really small groups that comprised of executive committee members who went through and did these sort of next steps. So I'm hoping that some of the folks both in the room and on the screen who did some of that work can also be the ones to really walk you all through the work that was done. That sounds good, everyone, yes? All right, great. So there's some folks who are not yet here, so who worked on some of these goals. So I'm thinking we might want to jump around a little bit. And so if folks are comfortable, I think we may want to start with goal 2. And Senator Clarkson, I think.
Well, Ruth is, I think we have Ruth here, which we didn't have. Goal 1 is the end.
Yeah, so Commissioner Smith and Chris Loso did a lot of the heavy lifting on goal 1, which was around identifying some priority sectors in the state that need more folks. And Commissioner Smith will be here. She's just running a little bit late, so I'm thinking we just skip over that one until she joins and focus on goal 2, which originally was around piloting 2 new adult CTE programs or pathways. And what the executive committee, where they sort of came to was that goal may actually be better if it's a little more broad and expansive and inclusive of all the different ways that adults can re-engage and advance in the workforce. Does that sound correct to you, Senator?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we really dug deep into re-engaging adults who, for one reason or another, have exited the workforce or who have never been in the workforce. And what are the opportunities for us to bring them back in? And Ruth, you are here, and the beginning of our goal is pretty self-explanatory. This is the goal is to support adult Vermonters, including those seeking to grow their skills, change careers, or rejoin the workforce in attaining meaningful employment by expanding access to coordinated, clearly defined, and stackable education and training pathways that lead to credentials of value and align with Vermont's current and emerging workforce needs. And we can walk through these. Ruth, what would you like to do? What should we do? Because
I think what you and Drake have shared is absolutely right. And I think it's a question of what would be most helpful to the rest of the board. And Drake, do you have any guidance for us on what you were thinking about that?
Yeah,
I definitely defer to this group. When this work was done, the executive committee was very sort of collaborative and folks, I shared my screen. We all looked at the same documents. Folks in the room have printouts of these updated documents. But I guess my question for folks who are not in the room is, would you rather take a look at what was sent to you previously, or is it more helpful for me to share my screen and we can look through?
Yes, because each one of them, with all the goals, each one of them has a strategy and activity, and then the partners that we work with to accomplish these goals. So, and what's lovely about all the goals, thank you, Drake and Savannah, is that they're consistently laid out so that they are consistently presented, and we hope relatively easy to access and understand. But we're either happy to, Ruth and I can walk through the strategies that are straightforward. I mean, we have fewer strategies than activities. There are a whole lot of activities that keep us busy pretty full time, but we have 4 very distinct strategies and lots of activities and happily many partners to accomplish them.
So we have about 10 to 15 minutes to go through each one to keep with our time. And from what I saw some nods on the screen, I think I will go ahead and share my screen if that works for folks. Okay, great. Give me a minute. It's a little wonky.
Can I ask real quick, Drake, going through these today is really just all of us getting on board, but then we're selecting to dive deeper into some of these.
Yeah.
We're not actually putting any work to this today, just more.
Well, we're hoping people, I think, are we hoping that people are going to vote on the goals and accept them?
we're hoping that the board will vote on these updated goal drafts, which really are setting the groundwork and the framework for committees to then go and continue to work on these documents. So yes, the hope is that we can review them. If folks, I think if there are discussion points, those would be really good ideas for us to kind of parking lot for when committees are formed. So it's not that the executive committee is saying, here's what everyone's going to do, now go do it. It's really to get committees started and have a sort of a shared understanding of what does it mean when we say we care about, adult education? What does it mean when we say we care about supporting businesses to expand or relocate to Vermont? And then when the committees are formed, they'll do a lot more of that deep work to figure out, how is this operationalized and what really will the board and committees be focused on, if that makes sense.
Well, going through them, we hope people will get excited and choose to volunteer and serve on one of these.
Yes. All right.
What is that?
Is what I thought was in. All right, can folks see a document that says SWDB Executive Committee? Okay, great. So this is the updated goal document that the Executive Committee has worked on. The initial language in italics was the goal that you all passed back in September. And then you can see that there has been an update to this goal. And I do want to point out before, and Senator Clarkson and Ruth, please cut me off at any point. What the Executive Committee identified is that what the board passed actually looks a little bit more like an activity than an actual goal, language, and that the goal is really about supporting adults to reengage and advance in the workforce, and potentially piloting new adult CTE pathways is one way to achieve that goal.
Right.
So the small group worked on, what are all of the different ways that the board could endeavor to support adults to reengage and advance in the workforce, ways that are, appropriate for the board to engage in, aligned with work that's happening at the Agency of Education, and then also potentially started to brainstorm some partners, that have representation on the board and that also are represented in the community that would also be important to this goal. So I would say Ruth and Senator Clarkson, if there's anything else you want to add about this, or if you'd like to briefly walk folks through, and then we can open up to discussion.
Ruth, what would you like? I think it's fairly self-explanatory as we all look at these. The first strategy is to expand and coordinate adult education and training opportunities, including adult CTE and adult education and literacy. And then within that, we have many activities and many partners. We're happy to read them and just walk through them. One is conducting a statewide gap analysis to identify regional workforce and skill development needs. The second one is to expand availability and consistency. One of our big challenges with adult training opportunities is consistency statewide, including adult CTE, which is the most inconsistent, and adult education and literacy, which is the more consistent across all regions of the state. The third is to pilot 1 to 3 new adult CTE programs or pathways aligned with in-demand sectors, and that we would be obviously coordinating in some ways with Goal 1 and the committee there. The fourth is strengthen coordination among adult education learner providers, adult CTE, workforce programs, and post-secondary institutions to streamline intake, assessment, and referrals, creating seamless on-ramps from foundational skills to credential-bearing programs. And the fifth is to develop centralized resources and regular communication mechanisms to support ongoing coordination among providers. And the sixth is simplify navigation for adults seeking education, training, employment opportunities, including coordinated marketing of adult learning options. And you can see the partners, the partner list is incomplete, but it was a start. And as Jay and Ruth and Drake and Tiffany and I brainstormed this was the group that we were had identified. And Ruth, you want to take strategy number 2? Are there any questions
Sure.
about strategy number 1?
We did also have, I'll just point out.
Is there more on that?
It is, and I don't know that we need to go through everything, because this is really,
yeah, it's
meant to spur conversation for committees,
Right.
as a list of all the different types of things that could happen. One thing that will need to happen though, is we've talked about at previous meetings that there's a new federal program coming called Workforce Pell, that we have not dove deeply into because we still have not gotten guidance on what the board's role is. But this is one place where there's a real nexus between, workforce partners, higher ed institutions, and the board. So that will certainly be something that, this committee could work on, that other, we may have a Workforce Pell work group that could be comprised of board members, and there will be board responsibilities in standing up that federal program, which we will be talking more about in the new year. So yeah, so maybe I don't know, Ruth, if there's anything you want to add about the other strategies that we have here, which
Well, and I think I just wanted to also say that for some folks who are thinking about this, they may see more of a focus on adult CTE and adult education and literacy. And that was intentional because the secondary CTE system has a very clear framework for the data they must use to start new programs, the process they must use, a whole state approvals through the state board rules for the Agency of Education, and federal Perkins funding requirements. So that's an area where we felt like the work to figure out program expansion at the secondary level is more structured. So it was less, there was less need for priority. There are requirements in federal law that require that there's regular engagement with secondary CTE and the State Workforce Development Board, but the programs themselves have very specific things that have to happen under secondary CTE regulations. And we all acknowledge that in establishing this goal, we recognize that the adult CTE system is underfunded. And so the lack of consistency is driven in large part by resources and the lack of availability of consistent resources. So within that framework, this was the context that the group that worked on this goal was navigating from, if that's helpful to understand where we started in our mindset.
Right. Thanks, Ruth.
What are you referring to, secondary? You talk about like high school students and CTE?
High school.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there some possibility of sharing resources, I assume?
It already exists. They already do share resources. Adult CTE does use our CTE centers. In large measure, they may also start using some of the new ones that are being built. Associated General, that's out of Associated General.
Is adult CTE only funded through AOV? DOL have any funding for adult CTE?
The Agency of Education doesn't provide any real funding for adult CTE, and it's only Department of Labor funding primarily.
And it is education. It is bizarre that adults were somehow divorced from the Agency of Education. I mean, it's a decision that
it goes back a long way.
It goes back a long way. That doesn't mean it was a good one.
No, it just means it's become a norm with that was based on a decision that may not have been
well thought out.
So I'm just gonna weigh in here, it's fine speaking. Previously, it's my understanding that Department of Labor was giving out about $20,000 to each CTE center to be repurposed for adult CTE, which is, nothing basically. And oftentimes it went to other more important, it's my choice of words, not anybody else's. And the department is doing something very cool. And they're going to take that money and put it into an opportunity for 3 different adult CTEs, put in grant applications for close to $300,000 and do something big and much more long lasting.
Right.
The application isn't out. None of that information is out yet, but it will be, I think, in early 26. So that's a cool thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why only three? I'm sorry.
I think they want to make sure we would be a good pile, I mean, a good chunk of money for them to see it through from start to finish. So it works out to be about 300,000 over 3 years.
And I think it's for more program development, whereas the 20,000 are more like tangible needs.
Yeah, but it seems like it needs to be there. I think
Well,
It's the tension between the amount of funding and the amount of.
there's not enough funding, and so I think Jay is the one who I think he was spearheaded this, Jay Ramsey,
Yes.
this Jay.
Yes.
And I believe the feeling is, really, let's do a better job and really focus on piloting 3 really excellent adult CTE programs. And then,
Chittenden County, not, it would be better to be distributed throughout the.
it will be, trust me.
Well, and what would be interesting is if
will
hopefully
be.
if you're going to 3, whereas 20,000 went to each one, my hope is that these are collaborative among the CTA centers and that they come together to use this more and that hopefully it does go to more than just certain ones.
That's a good point. I just with my pictures, 3 grants.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you can see in this updated goal document, and Ronnie, thank you for mentioning the like collaboration and encouraging that, because I think a lot of what this smaller group that worked on this goal was focused on is how can the board be facilitating, deeper connections among partners, whether it's between higher education, folks that are already delivering adult education, different state agencies, community partners, like be that sort of organizing, facilitating, coordinating force. And then, figure out where are there more opportunities for, really successful programs that exist in one part of the state that could be expanded, connections that haven't been made that could be. And there, I'll also say, the second strategy here is around a term called credentials of value, which a lot of folks are probably familiar with. The previous iteration of the board did some work to come up with a state definition of that term. I think that, to my knowledge, that was not completed. So I think there's more opportunity for the board to be, closing some of the loops on previous work of past boards and being of service to the adult education community. So that's where.
And Drake, I would
Yes.
add to that Perkins and WIOA both put emphasis on ensuring that our CTE and workforce development systems really lead to participants in those systems earning those credentials of value. In the Perkins landscape, they're called post-secondary credentials. In WIOA, you've got the whole and none of them define specifically what those include. There's been work done in the CTE realm at the national level to establish some common definitions, but the work sort of began just as the pandemic was. I think the work of the board, as I understand it, was really trying to create that definition for Vermont and a shared list of credentials. And then the pandemic derailed some of that work and it wasn't picked back up. But we've had to do the work in career technical education because we have to report annually to the U.S. Department of Education our CTE high school students who earn those credentials. And so I think that we are further ahead than we were in 2020, but we haven't had the opportunity to really calibrate that work across all workforce development systems.
All right, does anyone else have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns about the work that the executive committee did on this goal?
We hope you love it.
That's great.
Right, Ruth? Jay, what was it?
Yes. Oh, Haley, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I was looking through like the partner list, and I think that in particular for that goal, the SNAP Employment and Training Program, which is called ICANN in Vermont, would be a really kind of like key partner in aspects of that, with re-engaging and reducing barriers for an older population who's trying to re-engage in the workforce. So just noting we might be a good partner to add to that list.
Thank you. That's great. And one thing I'll say again, I know. Yeah, so I was right, but yeah, I was going to see here. So Haley was mentioning that SNAP Employment and Training, in particular, the ICANN program would be a really good partner for this goal that wasn't listed in the implementation partner. So I appreciate that. And one thing that I know Sabina has said multiple times is that once we get to the point where we're establishing subcommittees, we want those committees to be comprised of board members and non-board members as well. So I think folks who may not, be officially on the board, but who have a stake in these programs and issues, we want them to be at the table too. So
You're calling your Haley.
great. All right, so I see that Commissioner Smith has joined us. Good morning. Commissioner Smith, we have been going through, we just went through goal 2. We're just sort of filling the rest of the board in on the work that the executive committee has done since the board passed the goals in September. And I'm curious if you, since you're really in most ways the architect of the work that has happened on goal 1, if you would want to sort of walk the board through the work that you have done with Pricloso and others, and I can share my screen so that folks can take a look. Does that work for you?
Excellent.
Sorry to
Yes.
put you on
Good
the spot.
morning, everybody. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, maybe not as loudly as we'd like.
Sure. Those on their computer said yes. So, Drake, while you're pulling up your screen, I'm going to work from your share. That way I'm being coherent with what everyone's looking at. Goal number 1 dealt with identifying the 5 priority sectors for the state. I'm waiting for, sorry, Drake, I'm going to just, it's right at the top of that.
Yeah,
paper.
it's going to take me a minute because of the text setup here. So go ahead and it will pop up at some point for you.
And so let me pull it up on my end then.
Oh, that would be great if you could do that, actually. Thank you.
Is Kendall? Oh, great.
Yep, I'm just sorry.
No,
I appreciate that very
and
much.
happily, we have it, Kendall, printed out in our little packet here.
Oh, excellent. Can everybody see now a Word document on your screen?
It's very tiny, but yes.
So what goal number 1 is it is focused around increasing the supply of workers in key sectors. And it charged us with developing recruiting targets for the workers in 5 sectors with the greatest need, and then develop sector-specific strategies to increase the supply of workers in collaboration with employers, ACCD, and other stakeholders. So
Kendall,
our first.
I know you're no longer sharing the document.
We can see your desktop, but not the document.
There you go.
Okay, I guess I tapped there. Sorry. Multiple screens here is making it so it's easier for me to read. Sorry about that, you guys. So I don't know, I apologize for being late, but this goal is very cross-cutting to the other goals for this board is one thing that we came to understand as we were working on it. So what we started by doing was just try to take the first cut at identifying the 5 key sectors. And then once we understand how the rest of the goals and the strategies are shaping up, there's a way that this has a nexus to almost everything else that we will be doing and talking about. So what you have in front of you here is in no particular order an outline of 5 core sectors that we've identified. How we did this was we first just pulled the data from the Labor Market Information Division. Something that the Department of Labor does within the McClure Foundation every other year is create what's called the Most Promising Jobs Brochure, which actually projects out the 10-year demand in different jobs, as well as the wages. And so using that similar type of methodology, looking at, what are our economic drivers in the state? We just did that poll. And then we tried to apply some of the policy lens on top of it in terms of where we have consensus goals across the executive branch, legislative branch, stakeholder groups in the state for things we're trying to do, like improve our infrastructure, improve our housing, and which sectors are closely connected to that. So that was kind of the lens or the approach used in coming up with this list. And I'm not going to read everything on this paper for everybody that outlines then some of the basically justification information in that way. But the 5 areas we came to were construction and trades, that connects back to housing, it connects back to climate resiliency, it connects back, there's a lot of, we'll get to advanced manufacturing in a second, but there's a lot of crossover with manufacturing as well. and there is definitely the demand. These are not in any particular order, I apologize. The second one, manufacturing. I also want to say I don't think necessarily these 5 sectors should hopefully look surprising to anybody. I'll pause in a second if anyone wants to discuss them further. But manufacturing, we're a rural state. A lot of our rural communities in the past had run on manufacturing. We're seeing a lot of really cool, innovative, advanced manufacturing, high-skilled jobs, entry-level jobs. There's a nexus to registered apprenticeships, which is something our agency oversees as the apprenticeship agency. And there's a growing demand for that type of experiential learning. Healthcare and social services. So we talk a lot about our aging demographic and the demand for healthcare and the kind of the cross sector of access and affordability in healthcare. For the State Workforce Development Board, we won't be doing necessarily deep dives into healthcare policy itself, but we do know there is an ever increasing demand for healthcare and social service workers in all areas. So whether you're talking an LNA up through specialist. There's also, we've touched on this a little bit in the past, there's been a long-standing healthcare workforce kind of subgroup of the State Workforce Development Board that is coming up with their own type of strategic plan and targets that we want to integrate, keep them close, keep them in the umbrella. A lot of really good work going on here. So we do need across the board. I'm sure I don't have to necessarily sell past the close on healthcare for anybody in terms of how important that workforce is going to be for us. Professional and business services. I don't know, like, what is that? That sounds nebulous. That sounds vague. What we're trying to get at here is IT and tech, and the IT and tech sector. We have a lot of really exciting work going on in this space that touches also on advanced manufacturing, on trades, but also cloud computing, software-based companies. We have the Vermont Tech Alliance, and we have a little bit of a tech cluster here in Vermont that we've been trying to nurture and grow over the years. We've been trying to attract remote workers to Vermont. This is an industry, especially if you're doing things that are cloud-based essentially, or R&D, where you can live in Vermont, work from home. And when we were doing the relocation incentives, we saw a little bit of a crossover or synergy there. And then number 5, leisure and hospitality. Again, we all know we have a lot of tourism to our state. That's a very important economic driver for us. Whether you're talking ski resorts, whether you're talking retail, whether you're talking outdoor recreation, obviously with the burgeoning mountain biking culture that we have, the Frisbee game, I'm forgetting what that is, where we hold the national championships. What is the Frisbees that you throw into the disc golf? Thank you. Whoever just said disc golf, thank you. Haven't had enough coffee yet this morning. Disc golf, we hold a national championship here, I think almost every year. And so there's a whole workforce we need to keep those, obviously those events and those opportunities to draw tourists in. And what I can't help myself but saying when it comes to this sector is it's so important, because how do we then convert those tourists to full-time residents? Come to the state, you like recreating here, how can we keep you here? I always think, especially, you're out in the mountain, it's beautiful, and you're like, I would love to live here, but what do these people do for work? And so how do we show these tourists when they come, if you want to live here, these are the jobs, and this is what we can all do for work. So those are really the 5. I'm not sure what you have necessarily. I apologize again in your packets in front of you, but if this is, you can scroll down and you can read more at your leisure, where this was a snapshot of the actual LMI, again, labor market information data, about our industries as a total share of employment. The one thing I'd say we left out here, and I put Y underneath, was trade, transportation, and utilities does rank high. However, I'm trying to think why LMI, I apologize, but I went down this thread, made a very compelling argument to us where, it captures with the way the data is pulled, recycled dollars as Vermonters buy everyday goods. So I can get Matt on if you want about why we didn't pull this to the top. We do have a lot of supply chain corridors here. As everybody knows, obviously we have a lot of strong utility companies. it becomes a little bit of, you're not necessarily trying to pick your favorite kids here, where every sector is important. And a lot of the strategies we talk about every day, and I know we'll talk about as a board, can support all sectors across Vermont. But feel free to look through some of that corresponding information as you have time. So Drake, I don't know if you had me on a timer and if I am within the allotted time with that kind of fire hose monologue. I apologize, everybody. But I'll go back to the top and see if there's questions or feedback.
Thanks, Kendall. That was great. Good. Great. Questions, comments, thoughts in the room or on the screen?
We're glad that the federal government is reopened so we can get more data again.
Yes, so are we.
Yeah, I definitely want to shout out Matt Barowitz for supporting the gathering of this data, which was great.
Yes, it's the only goal that comes with charts.
We can do more charts. So the next
no.
piece of this, again, those are the 5 sectors, but the next piece actually calls for more charts, because if we keep the goal as is, we need to then develop the recruiting targets for those and come up kind of with the individual workforce gap for each of those sectors. And then what strategies would we use to close that gap and meet demand?
Right. Oh, right.
Okay, are folks comfortable?
I think
moving
you guys
on
did
to the
rock
next
and work
goal?
on it.
All right, let's see how long it takes me to pull this up. So the third goal is around supporting businesses to expand and relocate to Vermont.
And this was Lindsay, right?
So yes, so this goal, we came to us from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Secretary Curley presented it to us at our last meeting. And then we worked to support with Secretary Curley and Tim Tierney to sort of do the next dive into what this means. And one thing I will say is this goal was written in a pretty specific way to ensure that what the board's activities were relative to business expansion and relocation really aligned with work that's already underway at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. So it was a little more specific than some of the other goals. And so really the work that this group did was to just pull out strategies that already really existed in the goal that the board passed in September. So you can see
that they're actively working on in the agency.
Yes, absolutely. And I say all that to say that there's less new information in this updated goal draft relative to the other 2 that we just discussed. So I think the important things here, because I don't think we have anyone from ACCD on the call today, is that really this goal is focused on strengthening alignment between our workforce and economic development systems. And then, supporting Vermont-based businesses to expand. I think there are a number of ways that the board can be engaged in that work. I'm not going to read every single thing because I think folks can take a look at those. And this is really just a starting point for this committee to begin their work. The work of this committee is also really centered around supporting businesses outside of Vermont to consider moving here. So there are different pieces there. One thing that was in the original goal that the board adopted in September was developing quote unquote workforce readiness packages to highlight some of the data that potentially the Department of Labor is capturing, experiences from employers, different training opportunities. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for the board to be a conduit for sharing of sort of messaging, data, information to inform work to support, businesses already here to expand and businesses that aren't here to be here. And then the final piece of this updated goal is around collecting and sharing data sort of across agencies and across partners, including, leveraging employer feedback and best practices to sort of get that around to the state as well. And that was very high level, but I would love if folks had any thoughts or ideas or comments on this goal.
Yeah, this is kind of like the first goal where with CT also, where we're actually doing a lot of this work currently, but trying to coordinate it better. So in this goal, here, this is what the agency is very committed and already working on. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel with our going off and, doing a lot of work separate from what the agency's doing. So I think this is a great example of our integrating what's currently being done, and by articulating it, being able to add our special state workforce development board input to what the agency is already actively working on.
I also see this goal aligning heavily with goal 1.
Yeah.
So how do you upskill with the businesses you're trying to coordinate?
Yeah. Yes.
Also housing.
Also housing, yeah, I can say that. But yeah, I'm sure housing will be a thing that comes up for this group.
Housing never goes away. I mean, it doesn't come up. It's just there. It's there as a meeting, like.
I know we have a lot of business representation on this board, so I'm curious for folks who are here representing a business, if this feels aligned with what you think would be a helpful way for the board to support employers. Not to put anyone on the spot, but would love to hear from folks.
All right, I'll jump in. Hey, I'm just curious as far as, so workforce development is developing current and new possible employers. And so consequently, I'm not certain how this kind of goes hand in hand to some extent, because, what we're trying to do is find new workers or bring new workers into the workforce. But, you bring in more businesses and then we're going to be looking for more workers kind of idea. So this is kind of like a little kind of a side, I think.
You see this as competition to what you do?
No competition to what the board is about. Meaning, we're looking for people. We're looking to bring in people, and the surrounding states all have low unemployment rates. So where are we going to find these people? And so we bring in more businesses. We're going to be looking for more employees. So it's great to do it, no doubt about it. But it's, I don't know, as far as our board looking for new employees, not new employers.
Well, that's, yeah.
Well, that's how I think it aligns with goal 1. If we're going to create new programs and training programs, it should align with businesses. So we're building up Vermonters that are
should
here as
align,
well,
yes.
instead of just saying someone. Because then it's a competence problem.
I think it's multifaceted as well. I think if you have businesses that come here, you'll keep Vermonters. That's one of our challenges, right? Is keeping people in the state. They'll expand opportunities, which is a really big deal. And again, if you look at the charts that we saw in our first meeting early in the year that Matthew brought in, we lose people in their early 30s, they leave, right? So if you have businesses where they can expand their potential, both in income and, opportunities for personal growth, economic growth, right? Those people will stay as well. So I think we have to be really careful. Yes, there'll be more competition, but if there's an opportunity, it'll drive people to move into the state, right? I think it goes hand in hand. It really does. It's tough to separate. I think right now the numbers really kind of reach what some of the problem is in the early 30s, and then they come back in the 60s when, unfortunately, they don't, they're ready to retire, right? Which is wonderful, except they're not adding to kind of the workforce, right?
Give you a type of business. Wow.
For sure, right? For sure. Different opportunities bring different people.
How that something like this worked well for nursing, because often the nurse's spouse of whatever was bringing the other person coming here. So I think it does feel a little bit of competition, but at the same time, we need to do both. I think.
And some of the businesses coming in are really unique industries, but I think are driving people in here, especially in the IT sector.
Seems like quality of life is a big factor here. I feel states, financial incentives, things like that. Quick stuff. People can come into this quality of life.
Especially when they're bringing up children.
Right.
You see people going away in their 20s, but coming back in their 30s.
Right.
But I think you need to start thinking about it. You financial scale as well. For sure, you can't just rely on quality of life, because let's face it, it is inexpensive to live here.
You got to afford the quality of life.
Exactly. we're gonna start, there was an article not long ago in the New York Times, and they were talking about people leaving New York. One of the states that they brought up was Vermont, not moving to Vermont, but moving away, living 51% of the time in Florida, and 49% of the time in Vermont, so that you can avoid the tax burden. Vermont is the third worst tax state in the country, right? And so we can take advantage of the quality of life, and the people here, we're all fortunate to live here, but we have careers to support that. People coming in, it's not easy. It's not easy. And I hear that all the time from people that come in and apply for jobs at my company. And, I'm like one of 3 that they're talking to that will support their ability to live.
Well,
It's not easy.
and then we also have the trend of what we see. I live in Woodstock. All the new families that are moving in can only afford to move in Woodstock right now because it's so outrageously expensive to buy a house. The only families that are moving in have remote incomes. So they're all remote workers.
Or Hollywood stars.
We don't have that many Hollywood stars.
Well, and I also think too, this one really leans into that next goal of retaining Vermonters going into higher ed. I think that if we have the industries here that they see themselves growing into, then they'll be more incentivized to go to school here.
And bringing adults back in because COVID, we lost a lot of adults. And we want to keep adults in the workforce longer. I mean, as I look at a lot of people who are retiring way too young, I think, really, at age 70, I look at them and I think, you're way too young to retire. Keep going. And I mean, it's many people finding second and third careers in their 50s and 60s and getting engaged right through, which is exciting.
It's almost like y'all passed a group of goals that really are interrelated.
Yeah.
So great. All right, so I love this conversation, and Ronnie, I'm gonna take that beautiful segue and move us to goal 4. Can folks see goal 4? If you can't see it and you're virtual, just shout at me, but I think it should be up here.
We can see it.
Thank you. All right, so this is the 4th goal. Scott Giles was pretty instrumental in us building this out, and I don't know if he's able to join today, but want to express gratitude to him.
Could I just do a quick?
Yes, go ahead.
In that Vermont is one of the top 5 states in the country of out-of-state students coming to school here. And then we are like number 1 or number 2 with those income. So that's what sort of prompted this conversation. Because we do have lots of opportunities and we have great this. So what can we do to make them stay, help them stay? Obviously, we all know what a bunch of problems are, housing, salaries, but some of that is anecdotal. What was that? There are no jobs here and they don't pay well. Who gave us that one?
I think it was Scott.
Yeah, okay. But it's an anecdotal throwaway line and it's not necessarily true. So how do we change the narrative?
And there are lots of really low hanging fruits we can change.
Right.
I mean, as we know, we have the Green Mountain.
The 5,000.
Our
loan
forgiveness program that we launched, which is oddly not as fully subscribed as one would think. But just to keep them here.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, so this goal you can see is around increasing retention of post-secondary graduates. And so the strategies that were identified to sort of build out this goal are around strengthening employer connections and job placement. These are things that are already happening, but how can they even be sort of like supercharged so that students who are, approaching graduation really know about like a pathway to a job that's exciting for them. We also, and Sabina mentioned that there's no jobs and they don't pay well. I think there's some work that this committee and the board could do to dig a little bit deeper into what are those barriers to retention, both real barriers and perceived barriers. Because either way, if that's the reason that someone leaves, who does it really matter if it's real or not, right? It's real to them. And then you were also thinking, Senator Fluxon, to your point, that there are a lot of programs, and there have been a lot of programs, especially over the past few years with COVID dollars that have been really targeted at retaining folks in certain careers or to sort of entice Vermonters to move here or to make it easier for folks to, repay student loans or scholarships for different programs.
Yeah, we spent a bomb on the essential workforce. Being one of them.
And Scott had a really great idea about different ways that the board and that this committee might dig a little bit deeper into what was the effectiveness of those programs, maybe even through some qualitative lenses, like surveying past participants, like learning from them, what was helpful, what didn't help as much, what would have been more helpful, to see if there are any sort of common threads for a lot of those programs that have made an impact, and many of them also, we don't have it more because the funding ran out, right? So there's a lot of opportunities there. And then continuing to scroll down here, it was an interesting conversation that we've had, which I think Phil goes to some of the service to career conversations that have been happening in the state, which is, how can we, for folks that are coming out of college, really promote community integration and engagement, having folks feel like they're a part of the community, working with, local chambers, community organizations, volunteer groups, to promote existing and create new programs, and then explore new opportunities for mentorship, service opportunities, networking. And again, that's not to say none of this is happening. Of course it is, but I think there will hopefully be ways that the board can plug in and add to that conversation. And let's see, excuse me, mouse. There's definitely work to do here to lean even more into aligning higher education and workforce development. So our higher ed institutions would be really key partners for this goal. And then again, this has come up a couple times, but there's a potential to develop some shared messaging to promote retention of post-secondary graduates.
We've mentioned in some of these committees that it's not just board members. I think this would be an interesting one to bring youth voice into.
I love that idea.
Because a lot of the way we talk to youth is from the higher ed perspective and not necessarily coming from the high school.
Yes.
Yeah, and university, both.
Yeah.
Right then.
And we for sure.
Well, we have a youth council that, that we created several years ago, the state youth council.
Yeah. But this is a youth council too. You already have individuals that are highly motivated to engage, which is why they join it. I'd be curious if you were to engage in other avenues. And like even CT students. Yeah. I mean, I think it'd just be really curious to hear from them what and why, and guidance counselors too.
Oh, good point, because the guidance counselors see a whole bunch of them as opposed to just one person's perspective. Great idea.
I know there have been a number of, to your point, Senator, a number of conversations around CTE around the state that have really centered the experiences of students. I think it's really enriched that work. So I really love that idea.
Yeah, we heard like that.
I love the post-secondary piece. I'm curious, we have data about the number of students, that high school students that are actually interested in going to college, right? And so I'm coming from the secondary world, and they need these pathway options exposed to that just because. How can we keep our nursing students from going to Florida? Why aren't they going to Steve? And I appreciate Ruth's message, and I understand the idea of our restrictions perfectly start programming, but to me, we're missing a whole population of potential workforce. Why not talking about a secondary sector?
And it's a really ready workforce. They are motivated to work.
And is what they really look for is, okay, so, where can I go from here inside my program?
Well,
regardless of what it is. So this idea of building with employers to create those pathways, actually recognizing the credentials of value that CTE does provide. A lot of times employers don't even know what these are, but we're required to provide them to students. So I think there's some opportunity there, both in the business community, but also secondary.
Well, education is heavily invested in that, building that bridge with dual enrollment and with so many opportunities to take courses at Vermont State University and other places. So I mean, we've already started to build that bridge, and I think the more we do that, the better too.
Well, I mean, our high school youth programs, what we hear a lot from students in Vermont is affordability. Like that's what they just hear it from their parents, they hear it from everybody. They think of affordability, and honestly, CTE, CCD, we have a lot of pathways that I just don't think students know about.
Yes, I agree.
That makes it more important to go on to those pathways. And I think better messaging around that and broader. But sometimes the message is only college, and
I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think there is a
No,
single
I just-
counselor in this state that is just promoting.
It may still be the conversation in like some families.
and at dinner tables, yeah. And I definitely think CTE, and I'm coming from a very, girl, women perspective on this, CTE is not talked about heavily for females in that same vein. So yeah, I just think the messaging is huge and having it broad enough to reach every student.
Ruth, I see your hand raised. I don't know how long it's been raised, so I apologize if it's been a while.
She could also just jump in.
I was going to agree with Jeremy. I think we have to really think about in the secondary CTE realm, and I'm sure the secondary realm overall, how we help our students stay in Vermont, what that means, how we coordinate those efforts. So I fully agree with Jeremy. And I would also say the part that goes back to goal 2 and the credentials of value is, yes, we're required by federal CTE Perkins legislation to really have as a program quality measure for our high school students, the fact that they earn post-secondary credentials related to their CTE program of study. And we still have many employers in Vermont who don't yet understand those credentials, or who other states have done more work than Vermont has. So in sort of having a curated list of credentials that are validated by employers and recognized by employers and have implications for hiring and retention and advancement and wages. So there's more work to do in those areas as well. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. I fully agree, Jeremy.
Those other states have been doing success.
Yeah, Ruth does that all the time.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of national conversations that happen in the career tech ed world that bring us all together to work on it and calibrate and do things. But I think this goes back to where our systems are more siloed, right? So we're doing certain work in the education space, and everyone around the country is doing that work in the education space. How do we at the state level and in other systems do the work across sectors and across agencies and more innovative ways? And I think that's where Vermont's not alone in facing the challenges we do, and we're not alone in the fact that we have systems that are under-resourced or staff that are stressed to capacity, who are then charged with sort of adding this next layer of coordination in ways that have great intentions but don't always have the systems to best support that happening. So all of this could help us think those things through.
Aaron, I see your hand raised as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to throw kudos out to Ruth and Jeremy for their work in tech ed. I too am a big tech ed person, and a couple of weeks ago at the AOE strategic planning in one of the breakout sessions, it was still talked about that there were 2 pathways. There was a college-bound pathways or a CTE pathway. And if the AOE is continuing to spread that as a message, we are not in good shape. We have got to, it's not either or, they are all encompassing.
So I think it's safe to say there's a lot of really exciting work and conversations to come. I don't want to speak for anyone, but I am also aware of time, and we have our guest, Kevin Chu, joining us, who's going to present hopefully in 4 minutes, if we're still sticking to the agenda.
Are you looking for motion, Mr. Chair, for the passage of our goals as we thought and we identified?
Motion, I can get a motion to approve all the, everything that's been presented as far as the goals.
Well, we'll have to make the motion, then there can be further discussion, 3 minutes of discussion.
Please stop it. Just stop it.
I would move that that the State Workforce Development Board accept the newly revised goals as distributed. And that's my motion for 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes of discussion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Kendall, you didn't raise your hand to the opposed. You were just late on the approved, right?
It was an I.
Okay, great. Okay, all right.
Yeah. All right, so thank you all for hanging in with us while we spent another meeting discussing these. I think these are really in good shape. The executive committee really did a lot of work and leaned into doing that next dive. And so the next steps are we're gonna send around, we'll send this around again, what you all just approved. I think we're gonna send it around probably like a Microsoft form where folks can indicate what they're really interested in working on. And then we're hoping to form some subcommittees around these 4 goals to our goal for establishing those committees is that they could start meeting in the new year. And we're, maybe every other month, we'll sort of figure out with the folks that are interested in joining those committees. And then we'll also want to hear from you all about who else should be at those tables.
We're gonna open that to other departments as well, right?
Yes.
We want across the department.
How large do you hope this?
Question. What do you think, Sabina? I think the more the merrier.
You think 60 is too big?
I worry about that when we see who signs up and who we,
By years.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if it gets too big, that's a great problem to have. Too many people wanting to serve on that committee.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, see what the interest is. I think that's a very good question. Yeah, not too big.
And so I'm gonna stop talking for a little bit.
And just take a 5-minute break so we can set things up and get going and all that, right? We're gonna handle that.
Are we gonna take all right, quick break, y'all. Do we know where water is? We're gonna mute ourselves and be back in at 10:13.
Just some people are lower.
You can say,
Okay, we're gonna get started again?
yeah.
Okay, great.
Oh, do you have to turn the recording on?
It's continued. Yeah.
Okay. For those of you who might not know, Kevin Shuhey is the executive director of the Vermont Futures Project. In my humble opinion, he should be very well known because he's got many places talking about what we need to do as a state and has put together the economic action plan that you see in front of you. He graduated from Middlebury. He's a lifelong Vermonter, and he worked at UVM for six years. Did I get that right? Yep, in a variety of different roles. And this is one of my favorite presentations. Sorry.
It changes. It's not
It does.
the same presentation.
Right.
Did I dive right in?
And it definitely dovetails with everything that the workforce board is trying to do.
Yeah, as that conversation was unfolding before the break, almost every comment, I was like, oh, I've got data for that. Oh, we can go a little bit deeper. And I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for inviting me, Savannah. Thank you all for making the time in your agenda for me. I'm meeting some of you for the first time, so I'll just say a little bit more about who I am before diving into the presentation. I grew up in Vermont. I want to grow old here too. I feel lucky to call Vermont my home. Literally could have been anywhere. My parents immigrated from Southeast China back in 1986. Ended up in Vermont because I have an aunt that married an American and they happen to have a home in Shelburne. So that was my.
That's the random way you're running.
That's the one social connection that my parents had to this entire country, which is why I say I feel lucky that Vermont is my home. They left behind everything and everyone they knew in their mid-20s to pursue the American dream in search of economic opportunity. It's a really brave move. I don't think I would have been able to do that in my 20s. And I'm just so thankful that they were able to find opportunity here, right? They not only found their American dream, but they built their Vermont dream too. So the work that I do with the Vermont Futures Project is my way of paying it forward to make sure that opportunity continues to be part of Vermont's narrative, not only today, but moving forward into the future. So the organization has a mission question. This is the question on the screen. How can we use data to support the evolution of Vermont's economy towards a thriving future full of opportunity for all? Right, and you might be thinking, oh, mission question, that's different. Usually I hear mission statements. When we're working on the future, right, making a statement, we can say something today in 2025 and it might not be relevant in 5 years or 10 years, definitely not in 20. But we can come back to a good question and answer it in different ways as the world around us evolves. So one answer that we've put together for this question is the development of our economic action plan. So this was launched in January of this year. And then coincidentally, sometimes it's really good to be lucky. A couple months later, the book Abundance came out, Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, right? And you see that on the cover of this here. And it has just supercharged both the attention and the excitement for having this plan in place. So I'll provide an overview of what we mean by this and get into how it was built as well. It wasn't just me sitting at a desk with spreadsheets, although I love to do that. There's the quantitative piece, there's plenty of data in there, but it was also merging that with the qualitative research, the engagement with communities. I spent almost 2 years traveling around the state and trying to understand what are Vermonters facing in terms of challenges and barriers, what does the business community face, and just as important, what are their hopes, dreams, and ambitions for the future? Right, and how do we create a plan that aligns with what those dreams are? How do we get from here to there? First, we need to know what there is. This word cloud is just a short summary of some of the key themes I heard in that engagement process. I don't think any of these words or phrases will come as a surprise to you all. So the next step in collecting this was analyzing, okay, how do we separate symptoms from root causes? Right, and the symptoms here on the screen, these are the headlines that we hear. These are the conversations in our communities. These are the things that people can point to where they're saying, I am struggling, this is a challenge. But when we take a step back and think about root causes, demographics and housing scarcity
permeates through all of these symptoms. So we built the plan on these two pillars of people and places. And I'll go into some data detail on each of these. We'll start off with demographics. On the screen here, you'll see Vermont's age distribution from the year 2000, right? And the worst part about sharing this slide is admitting that 2000 was 25 years ago. It is painful to say that. What you'll notice is that in that year, we had about 226,000 Vermonters between the ages of 25 and 49. And there were about 77,500 65 plus. There were a lot of working age folks relative to the number of children and elderly. We had a much lower dependency ratio. So fast forward to closer to the present, and it's a very different picture. That 25 to 49 cohort has shrank. We've lost about 30,000 in that age cohort. Meanwhile, the 65 plus is nearly double. So what does this mean? What are the implications for our economy, for our workforce, for affordability? That working age population, that's our workforce. That's also our tax base. That's folks paying into commercial health insurance. And as that pool shrinks, they're carrying a larger burden, especially at a time when with an aging population, generally needs increase as well, right? So going from demographics to labor force and intersecting those data sets, here's where we're at. The blue bars represent the number of people within an age cohort. Green represents the labor force for each of those cohorts superimposed on top. And what you'll see is most working age folks are participating in the labor force. But our state's overall labor force participation rate has been dropping, and that's been driven by demographics, by retirements. It's a very unbalanced chart, right? So what can we do about it? Because that's a really important thing too, not just name the problem. We have divided the plan into two types of strategies. There's efficiency strategies, which asks, how can we do more with what we already have, right? And then there's expansion strategies, which is how do we bring more workers here? How do we add more houses? How do we grow as well? And these two things have to happen simultaneously. It's not neither or. They shouldn't be competing against each other. We have to do both. I like to think about this and actually a lot of data through the lens of athletics. I coach track and field at Middlebury College, so I often think through sports metaphors. When I look at this, I think of this as Vermont, what's called a college sports team, Team Vermont, right? And the reality is we have a lot of seniors that are going to be graduating from our workforce soon, retiring, and we need to do more to recruit the next class of freshmen and transfer sophomores from other states. I think it's incredible that we have a Division I men's soccer national championship team here in Vermont, and they're the #1 seed going into the tournament again this year. And you know that coaching staff has already lined up recruits for the next few classes. That's how you sustain team success in the long term. We can do that for our workforce as well. So efficiency and expansion, we need to go beyond just saying we need more workers and be able to put specific numbers on it, right? Because everywhere I go around the state, people say, I have a workforce shortage. We're in a housing crisis. And if I stop and ask, okay, well, how many houses do you need? Or how many workers does Vermont need? Very rarely do I get a direct answer. This is where data is super helpful. So when we look at the balance of workforce supply versus demand, right? How many people are entering the workforce versus how many people are leaving the workforce? We find that the annual gap is about 13,500. That's the number of people new people we should be trying to add into the workforce. Yes, some of that can come from folks who are already here. And we also need to attract talent from elsewhere. There are about 17,000 retirements each year. That's from the long-term occupational projections through 2032. To contextualize that number, we have about 5,300 total 12th grade students in the state of Vermont, right? And even if we retained 100% of that homegrown talent, it doesn't offset retirements. So then you add to that the college grads that we retain, which we can definitely improve on, and it still doesn't close the gap. So that's why it's a yes and. We have to do all of these things at once. So taking that 13,500 number, then looking out over the next 10, 15 years, we set an ambitious growth goal to increase Vermont's population to 802,000 by 2035. Again, not picked just because of the area code. Yes, that's helpful, but it's because of this gap, right? And then projecting out long term. So 802 by 2035, it scares some
Easy to
folks.
remember.
Yep, easy to remember. That's the thing. Another part of my background is in the field of education, and educational psychology. When you're setting goals, it's got to be a number that's easy to remember, that people take pride in, right? And that'll help to actually inspire action. Because 800,000 sounds really big and scary in a Vermont context, but 802 for some reason is just like familiar and comfortable. And
that's only in 10 years.
Yep, in 10.
So that's like the next census, and we're at 648,000 now, having grown only by about 22,000 from.
Yeah, and we'll get to what that looks like on an annual basis. A little bit of subliminal messaging here, but the picture in the background is from the day of the solar eclipse when Vermont had over 150,000 visitors to the state. So on that one day, we actually had over 800,000 people in the state, and we're still here. Vermont did great. So we can do it.
When you look at that number, are you breaking it down by age, like how many young, how many prime, how is that?
Yeah, so the focus should be on recruiting and attracting working age families, even better if they have kids, because we have a lot of latent capacity in our school system, right? Today, there's about 20,000 fewer students in our K-12 system than compared to 20 years ago.
But I can actually put a real experience on that, because when I entered the legislature in 2005, we had 120,000 students in our public education system, and we now have 78. In my lifetime in the legislature, it was just unbelievable.
What about government?
It's also them.
Has it gone up or down?
I don't know. I know we talk about there being roughly 8,000, but I think it's actually gone down.
But when you look at this number, that growth, you're really focusing on that prime working age.
Yes.
So you hit that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make this seemingly big number feel a little less scary. One of the really fun conversations I've had around the state is on how to translate aggregated goal growth into local targets and action. And there are many communities around the state that have experienced depopulation, right? Yes, Vermont's population overall has grown, but that growth has not been evenly distributed. And all the places that are blue and green on this map actually have fewer people today than they did at one point in their past. And this is a term that I call latent capacity. So if we just play out a thought experiment and said, what if we restored every town that has lost population just back to its historical peak? We're not growing beyond and turning every place into New Jersey. We're just getting back to what we were. Just doing that would add over 70,000 people to the state of Vermont. That's just rural revitalization, right? That probably means we can keep some of the local schools open. That means we sustain hospital services. And that has made change feel a little less scary because folks can think back, cognitive anchor to, oh, what was it like when I grew up here? Yeah, that'd be really nice to get back to just that. So going from that, right, we then have to talk about housing. That was mentioned in the comments that I heard, that workforce and housing are intricately linked. So we'll take a dive into some of that data as well. Housing scarcity. So from that demographic data, you can make the economic statement that Vermont needs more people. Part of the story that we need to help tell and also need to respond to is more people need Vermont. We saw that at the beginning of the pandemic. There was inbound migration at rates that were much higher than the previous decade, people seeking out Vermont. I actually expect demand for Vermont to persist. I've been working with a rural geographer at University of Vermont who has been tracking what are the reasons why people relocate to Vermont. Knowing that it's often multifaceted, people move for a variety of reasons, but some of the factors that are increasing in frequency are people choosing Vermont for climate reasons. It's not to say we won't be impacted by climate change, but on a relative basis, the Northeast is projected to do better than other parts of the country.
And you could still insure a house here as opposed to Florida.
Other factors, there's this growing trend of what she calls political migration. I call it values-based migration because the P word seems to piss people off sometimes. So political migration has a trend, but these factors, again, can work to our advantage, right? We need more people, and there are more people interested in moving here. How does that show up in terms of data? We often hear about housing prices and the affordability or unaffordability as one of the challenges. But if we just take a step back and think back to Econ 101, price is a reflection of the balance between demand and supply. And there's more demand than there is supply. But inherently, demand for Vermont is a good thing. I'll share a quick story. This was a conversation with a professor at Middlebury College who grew up in rural Alabama. And he told me his hometown, they could invest in trying to build more homes. They could try to invest in economic development, grow businesses, but people keep moving away. They don't want to be here. What he said to me was, people want to be in Vermont. We just have to get out of our own way.
Abundance. That goes back to abundance.
Yeah, I thought he put it very eloquently.
Oh my God, that's so good.
We can
haven't
address
read abundance. Read abundance.
affordability through an abundance of supply. That's the exact opposite of what has been happening. When we take a look at how the housing data, when homes are built, how many homes are built, we see that Vermont has some of the oldest housing stock in the country. About a quarter of the homes in Vermont were built before 1940. Then there was a period between the 60s, 70s, 80s, where we were building at a relatively healthy rate based on the needs of the population at that time. And then in recent decades, housing construction has decelerated significantly to the point where less than 20% of Vermont's housing stock has been built in the past 20 years. Right. So it shouldn't be a surprise that we're in a housing shortage given this data. Going from this to permits, right? Because building permits is a good proxy for how many homes might get built. We also see that downward trend over time. What does that word indicate, right? Permit, permission. That's how many homes that we allow. And this is part of what we tried to tackle in the economic action plan as well, is what do we have control over that is either slowing down or speeding up housing? What are we doing that's adding more cost, or what can we do to reduce some of those costs? The puzzle of building new housing is complex and multifaceted, and there are some pieces of it that are outside of our direct control. Vermont doesn't set federal interest rates. That's a factor. Set it aside and focus on what can we affect. This word permits, permission, it makes me think of a phrase I hear a lot, not only in Vermont, but around the country, where people say housing is a human right. Raise your hand if you've heard that. Yeah, almost everyone has. So my follow-up to that is, if housing is a human right, then it should be right to build housing. And in many instances, the default answer is no, and then you have to work through a laborious, costly process to get to a yes answer, and even then it might still be appealed. So those are, again, things that we can affect and change here in Vermont. The next couple of slides might be your only takeaway or the reason why I never get invited back. But I like to hold up the mirror because we talk about messaging. I think that's important. I love charts and data, but sometimes a good meme with some images is the best way to communicate information, right? One of these things is accused of attracting crime, lowering property value, and even changing the character of places, and it's illegal in many communities. The other one is cannabis. If we want to phrase it positively, because I think we should talk about the benefits that come with increasing housing supply, increasing our working age population. One of these things reduces stress and anxiety and helps people sleep. It can even boost the economy. Again, the other one is cannabis. We should legalize housing. So Vermont's future towards affordability and abundance.
The same argument is, however, healthcare. They also say healthcare is a human right, and it should be right to do.
Yeah, so I've put together a Venn diagram that summarizes the gist of the economic action plan. The blue and the green circles, that's where we are. That's the intersection. That's Vermont. We try to provide ample services. We have robust programs. And again, I think that is inherently a good thing where we want to take care of our neighbors. At the same time, we have low population density, and it's really hard to provide everything everywhere for everyone with low population density in a small tax base. The result is high cost of living. Affordability, cost of living, this is what's driving conversations all around the state. So how do we get there from here? We can either take that scarcity pathway, those conversations are already happening all around the state, and many people don't seem to like it. So what's the alternative? We can take an abundance pathway, accelerate housing growth, increase the working age population. The reality is there's going to be some strategies in both buckets that can help us get there. We just can't be in the middle. That doesn't exist. So translating that we are here into numbers, this was mentioned before the break, Vermont is third in the country in terms of state tax collections per capita. I mentioned I come from an athletics background. I'm inherently competitive, but I'm not aiming for us to be first on this. I would love to see Vermont get off the podium and start going in the other direction. We can,
total tax burden, that's the total tax burden.
yeah, per capita. North Dakota is number one. If you're wondering why, it's because of fracking, natural gas or oil and gas extraction. So there's lots of tax revenue from that. Hawaii second, Vermont's third. So we can change that by either reducing cost or expanding the tax base or a combination of the two, right? Numerator, denominator. So
that using the word collections is interesting because when I first saw that, when you first did this, I thought, oh, that means we're the best at collecting tax and that people are really good about actually paying their taxes,
yeah,
which I think Vermonters generally are.
I'm just visualizing.
But you don't mean it that way.
Data
All right.
that came from the Census Bureau. So I'm using the same terminology that the US.
I know, but it is an interesting.
It is interesting, yeah.
And you don't also equate big heart with tax challenge. Could we have
words and language matter? I agree.
Yeah, so we want to do everything.
There can be, yeah, we can follow up and dig into that data together. So I mentioned, here's our decision-making framework. And I said that a lot of Vermonters want to go down the abundance pathway. Don't just take my word for it. I've got data for you too. This is results from the Vermonter poll. This is a question that I have sponsored in multiple years, which is, are you supportive of growing Vermont's population size to strengthen its workforce? You'll see the 2022 results compared to 2025. There's been a significant increase in the number of people that are saying yes, right? There's this embrace of the abundance approach. And not only that, the number of people saying no has declined significantly as well. So
on this poll, we should partner with you at town meeting because we used to do the Doyle poll.
Yeah.
We don't do any polls now at town meeting. It would be great to do this again, something like this at town meeting.
yeah, I'd be happy to. So this is a question about population. I've put another question in there about housing. And this says, are you supportive of creating new housing to increase the population in Vermont? What about in your town? What about in your neighborhood? And you see the predictable dynamic where the closer to home it gets, more uncertainty and opposition. But that shouldn't be your takeaway. The takeaway is that at every scale, there are more people that say yes than no. Even at the neighborhood level, this year, over 50% of respondents said yes, even in my neighborhood. So I think a good follow-up conversation is, are those guest voices actually showing up and participating in decision-making processes? Do they feel empowered? Do they even have a voice? I'll share another quick story. I was talking to someone on the Williston Development Review Board, and she was telling me that Williston has a lot of retail jobs, and many of those workers actually don't live in Williston. So Williston's trying to build more housing, and yes, they've built some. But every time a new proposal is put forth, a small coalition of residents, about 12, oppose every proposal. And those workers who would benefit most from that new housing, because a lot of them want to live closer to where they work, they actually have no say in that process because they're not Williston residents.
Same issue in Manchester, to hear about that, that's fun down there.
Yeah. So it's one thing to have this polling data where folks can answer sort of based on what they say they want, but then it's another to map it onto, are there places where these yes voices can be heard and participate and influence outcomes? All right. Couple more slides, then we'll wrap up and open it up to conversation. Taking a look at sort of the broader trajectory of growth throughout Vermont's history, the last 2 decades are the anomaly. We have plateaued in terms of our population growth, and that's created this demographic pressure that we're feeling now. The 802 goal is simply to get us back on track, and getting there from here would only require about 2% growth per year. 2%, right? So this is an important thing in terms of messaging, is if I say we need to add 150,000 people to the state of Vermont, there's sometimes hesitation and panic, yeah. And people think, oh, I can't possibly imagine 150,000 people in my backyard. Like, no, we take a distributed approach. But the 2% number changes the conversation dramatically, because if you take that and think about your own community, let's say you live in a town of 1,000 people. 2% growth next year means how do you welcome 20 families or 20 people? 20 people, that would take maybe 7 or 8 total houses. That's 2% growth in a community of 1,000. So getting that buy-in to incremental action and progress is what leads to transformative change. Drink your milk, 2% for Vermont. We can do it. All right. And if you're interested in becoming an ambassador and helping to spread the message, if you want to receive new data visualizations as I make them, you can use this QR code, endorse the plan, and get on the newsletter distribution list. But I'll open it up to questions. We'll just go around there.
I just have a question on that growth number. That's all new people coming to Vermont, or are you at some point back pre-pandemic, like 88% of female workers were low-wage tip workers or part-time? Is part of that number also upskilling to make more full-time that can invest more in local economy, or is that all new Vermonters?
It also means Vermonters who are here that are not, could stay or are not participating in the labor force, and part of the economic action plan identifies specific barriers to labor force participation, whether it's childcare, folks that are involved with the justice system. There's a section on workers with disabilities. So each of those categories, we try to quantify how many people in Vermont are impacted by those types of barriers, and then what is the potential return on investment if we remove those barriers? How many more workers would it yield?
Got a question regarding the 4-year college students leaving the state.
Yeah.
What's your thought on what's going on there?
Yeah, I've got a few. So I think one of them is housing. If we take a look at the types of homes that we've built in Vermont, we definitely have a cultural preference for the single family home on large lots. Vermont has far fewer rental type properties as a percentage of our overall housing stock. If you think about a kid graduating from college, they might not be ready or have the financial resources to purchase a home, put down a down payment on a mortgage. So they're looking around at the viability of housing options available to them, and there's less of that here than other places. That's the housing piece. Then I think another piece of it is we also don't have the labor market opportunities that might align with the skills and qualifications that they're graduating with. About 68% of jobs in Vermont don't require a bachelor's degree or higher, 68% of entry-level jobs. So a lot of the students, we can see where they are going in the data. They're going to places like Boston, New York City, DC, Denver, some of the large cities in California. And I just took a quick glance at, let's say, the Boston metro area labor market, and about 42% of the jobs there, entry-level jobs, require a bachelor's or higher, right? So students are rationally seeking where are the places where they can get a good return on the investment that they made in their education. This is where business growth and expansion is so crucial to close that skills and employment opportunity gap. And doing so would also improve wages that college grads could earn. So that is tackled in the economic action plan. I think that there's also a lot more work that we can do to increase the efficiency of the system that we have in place. For example, the Green Mountain Jobs and Retention Program that was mentioned earlier. I think that part of why it's undersubscribed is because it's only restricted to folks graduating with bachelor's and master's, not folks earning an associate's or not folks coming out of.
So let's expand that this year. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I think that's an easy win.
That's also a great message that 68% of the entry-level jobs don't require a bachelor's, which also I think is a messaging opportunity for students who are not college bound, that there's still opportunity there.
But aren't those types of jobs not career-based jobs, right? So like that, you're not graduating from college and then applying, for that type of career. That's kind of your whole point in using Boston as the example, right? So we have to grow that type of career here so that people stay.
Well,
We don't want to just keep feeding the 68% number, right? We
We
want,
can do both.
right?
We can, yeah.
Some of those industries are high wage and
Yes,
growth opportunities too. They just don't require.
exactly.
Exactly.
And there is a career ladder where the starting point might not require a bachelor's
Yeah.
degree.
Is that inclusive of the trades? So is that 68% inclusive of like plumbers, electricians?
Yeah.
It's okay, but I would still consider that, you have to go through an apprentice program to be able to do that. That's still additional education, right? That's,
Yes.
so
But
that's a
it's
tricky,
well, it's an
that's a tricky
apprenticeship.
piece.
It's also
Ties
paid.
into your point,
Yeah.
Jeremy, earlier.
Right, but it's more education. So it's hard to just measure by,
Yeah.
right, college.
I do have.
But it's building
the
on
data
stuff they've already
for
started.
Each, level of educational attainment. So what's the percentage of jobs that require an associate's or a high school diploma or some sort of post-secondary, certificate. So that data is available. And I can share that.
All of that, the trades are gonna be super important on the housing, right? We're gonna grow housing, we need people in the trades to be able to support that. Because I know, friends of mine are in building and talking about getting people in the trades is a bit of a nightmare right now. And the costs are escalating like crazy, right?
Well, and our immigration policy isn't helping any. Nothing's helping.
I know there were more hands.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Kevin. Thank you for sharing it.
Well,
To achieve the 802 by 35, what do you see as the biggest levers? What do you think that's the biggest?
I mentioned legalizing housing. That would be definitely part of my priority list. I think we also have to get a little creative with how we approach the labor shortage issue, right? I often hear this in the context of housing of we don't have enough folks in the trades to build all the houses that we would need to be able to grow our population. And I had a really inspiring and thought-provoking conversation with some of the leadership team at Vermont State University that mentioned their campuses are about 30% overbuilt right now, meaning they could increase enrollment by that amount and still have space. So some of that underutilized space could be part of a short-term strategy where perhaps we invite in some temporary seasonal workers in the trades, in the construction to help get us unstuck from this housing chicken and egg scenario. We leverage seasonal workers in agriculture, in tourism and recreation. We have travel workers in healthcare, right? So that model perhaps could be extended to think about how to close the gap in the trades to get us unstuck and build some of the homes that we need to start promoting this inbound migration. Doing so would also make the local housing market healthier as well. Part of the challenge we face right now is because of demographics, we've seen median household size decrease. So there are Vermonters who might be occupying a home larger than their current needs. They might want to downsize, but if they have no option, then they can't free up that existing housing stock to someone else who may need it. And maybe some of those folks who come and work on projects on a temporary basis might look around and say, this is awesome, I want to stay.
I think we're seeing that already.
Yeah.
Right? It might not be necessarily the same programs that are bringing them from out of country, but we're seeing a lot of people coming up from Massachusetts, like they're just finding more opportunity here than they are down in their home states.
So seasonal agriculture brings them in, and then hopefully workforce training keeps them here too, which is what we've seen a lot of, coming in for either ski lifts, but then wanting to stay in Vermont through the summer.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it comes back to shifting mindsets, and it's almost some of the cultural pieces that are holding us back from taking these brave actions that can help us get to the goals that we need. It's embracing the growth mindset for the state of Vermont, talking more about the benefits that can come with it rather than just getting stuck on the fears of worst case scenarios. And I mentioned to Sabina, actually, I have a separate presentation, which is a Mythbusters one. So all these responses where people say no, right? Part of what I asked for in the Vermonter poll was, along with the yes, no answer, tell me why. Why don't you want more houses in your town? And I've been taking those responses and sort of sifting through patterns and themes, and then checking the story against the data. And I think that's another way that perhaps we could all partner to make some real progress, is change some of the stories that simply aren't true, or perhaps once were true and need to be updated. I'll give you an example. I actually have a few encore slides here. So one of the myths is like, there aren't enough jobs in Vermont for people who are here, let alone newcomers. And that used to be true. A decade ago, there were about 2 job seekers for every 1 open job in Vermont. More people looking for work than work available, but today it's an inverted ratio. There's 1 job seeker for every 2 open jobs. But that story is one that I keep hearing over and over. Yeah, the fears of turning into New Jersey. We can do this some other time. Actually, this one's fun. So Vermont's population is currently 70 people per square mile, and New Jersey's about 1,300. Growing to 802 would put us at about 87 people per square mile. 1 square mile is 640 acres. We can't figure out how to fit 17 more people in 640 acres. I think we have bigger problems. And this is a strong sentiment. This is a picture I took, stopped at a red light, and then I Googled the phrase, found you can buy bumper stickers, lawn signs, there's a Facebook page. It's a very common post on social media where people will respond in the comments to new housing proposals. They're like, well, I don't want my town to turn into New Jersey. So let's attach these stories head on and use data.
New Jersey's the Garden State.
Of course, you're looking at that chart with population growth, up to 2,000 flattening out. I grew up in Vermont, my family from Vermont bigger, right? So how does the birth rate play into that? And it's going to make it a lot harder going forward. It's going to make the housing a lot harder going forward and stuff like that. I wonder if that's something you ever looked into.
Yeah, in terms of the household size, so in 1970 it was 3.21. Tried to simplify the math here. So 2 homes, 6 people. So we're rounding a little bit. And to your point, today the median household size is a little bit smaller, and we haven't built enough homes. So there's still 6 people here on this slide, and still only 2 homes, but the needs of our population have changed. So those kids that grew up in our community either had to find a small apartment and roommates and move in and cram in, or they've left Vermont. So we need to be attentive to how is our built environment evolving as the needs of our population is evolving. And there's a lot of research coming out on fertility rate being impacted by economic factors.
And housing isn't the only one. I mean, you look at the cost of education for children going forward. It's expensive. Cost of childcare, which we've tried to help make a dent in, but it's enormous. I mean, so the cost parents are facing is ridiculous.
It totally is. And there's also the reality that with an older population, you expect fertility rates to go down too.
Maine, it's the same data for Maine, which is the oldest state in the country.
Yep.
I guess we're now number 3, right? New Hampshire comes in second.
Yeah.
They've edged us out.
Well, actually, part of that is because we've had some young people to Vermont.
Yeah.
Have you looked into like the transient ownership, like how are those numbers increasing? And obviously there's a huge effect with that, right? Taking up land, taking up, and then oftentimes there are groups that are challenging growth because they moved here for quality of life and don't want what they perceive their quality of life to change by increasing numbers, of buildings, something like that.
Yeah, so the proportion, I'm gonna go back to one of the previous slides. I try to break apart in terms of the homes that we have here in Vermont, how many are owner occupied, how many are renter occupied, and then it's kind of hard to see on this projector, but there's a gray sliver at the end of each of these bars that shows seasonal or vacant.
Seasonal is about 16%.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of attention right now specifically on the short-term rental market. There's high levels of variability town to town.
But for good reason. So in 2017, when we first started to address short-term rentals, there were 3,900. There are now over 13,000.
Wow.
Our housing crisis, I would argue, is more heavily impacted by short-term rentals than it is by seasonal rentals. As seasonal homes, which has stayed pretty much the same, but short-term rentals have really impacted the people who want to come and work on in a ski resort and used to be able to find a short-term rental for that.
Is some of that because of COVID, that people came here and acquired homes and then went into the short-term rental
I think
program?
some of the homes that may have been second homes or third or fourth, or whatever the number, it's not primary. If someone were able to move to Vermont during COVID with everything going remote, they actually had a pathway in because they already own some property here. It'll be interesting to see how this wave of return to office around the country starts to shape those decisions. Are they going to stay long-term? Are they going to shift to working for a Vermont-based company because they really like it here and they don't want to return to the office in New York City? It's too early to tell. But I think sometimes the conversation around the impacts of short-term rental, and yes, there are impacts, takes us away from having the bigger conversation about housing abundance and increasing supply.
Right, but it is one of the reasons it's much more constrained.
It's a factor.
And it's people buying them for investment. So there are more homes, and depending on the town ordinance you have, I mean, it's either owner, many towns are moving to owner occupied, the state may move that too. I mean, it's just, there are a lot of.
Just a quick follow-up to that, which is anyone familiar with the app Turo?
The actual, the what? Oh, that car.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Airbnb, but for the automobile market.
Oh.
You have a second or third vehicle that you only use occasionally, and someone's flying into Vermont and they need to rent a car. Maybe they don't have a Hertz or enterprise. They can rent your car and go up to the ski event. Anyways, it's a really big thing around the country, not so much in Vermont. But no one has ever been criticized for putting their second vehicle on the car rental market because we have an abundance of supply in the automobile market. I would love to get to a place where it's the same with the housing market, that we have an abundance of supply and we can allow.
Car rental companies might disagree with you. They insurance companies probably not love that idea.
Oh my God, insurance companies are having a heart attack on this.
Kind of think of the housing market as a game of musical chairs. And if we were to play that game right now in this room, it would be kind of boring because there are so many more chairs than people. And when the music stops, everyone can find a spot. You can even get up and shift to a different chair if you don't like the one you're in. I want the housing market to be a boring game of musical chairs.
Wouldn't that be nice?
What about all those towns that people have moved out of? I mean, they've got to be abundance in housing, those apartments, but it's gonna be too extra in most towns.
Yep, so this housing strategy in places that have depopulated will be different than the strategies in places where there has been growth. And part of it is rehabilitation, revitalization of existing structures. It might mean that action can actually happen more quickly because there may be infrastructure in place. There may already be roads. There might already be electrical connections. Yeah. And the data is a really good starting point to say, where are those biggest drops and where could we sort of rebound? So if there, you just had a hand up.
And Ronnie has to. That's how you do it.
Going back to the Airbnbs, we're seeing Yeah, the property management division, and we're seeing that a lot of our clients will, ponder the fact of putting their house where they've never had in the past, but they've been able to own homes for many years. Due to taxes, right? They're like, no, we need to offset our taxes. This is getting ridiculous. So therefore they put it in. I'd be curious as to how many of the, of the actual Airbnbs were part of the, rental kind of properties that people were renting for,
Full-time rentals.
yes.
For, yeah.
I bet it's not quite as big as we think. I mean, I think it's definitely a part of it, but I'd be interested to see how many actually were full-time rentals prior to going to Airbnb. Because Airbnb is not, I mean, it sounds great. Everyone thinks it's like a great moneymaker and everything, but it's a lot. It's a lot of work. Put together your team and you got,
I've been looking, we haven't had hands, but we are at 11, so I think maybe Ronnie, if you wanna.
Well, and mine was more just a comment that so much of this leans on policy, like being able to enact policies that allow us to grow. And a scary statistic this morning on BPR was that 60% of high schoolers don't plan to vote in the state of Vermont. And so thinking about all these goals and what we're trying to do, it's going to heavily rely on getting the younger population engaged in this too.
Well, the fifth grade, they're voting today. It's gonna be announced, I think, the kid's governor.
Yeah.
So there's Sarah Couple of Hands is dealing with this beginning in fifth grade now.
Can I leave you with some good news?
Please.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I hear a lot is that we can't grow our working age population because young people don't want to move here.
Oh,
and taking a look at the past 3 years of data in terms of inbound migration, it's actually working age folks who are moving here.
Exactly.
Even if we disregard the college age population because they are a bit more, they're a transitory segment of the overall population. There were more people in the 25 to 29 age range that moved here between 21 and 24 than the total number of 65 plus. Yeah.
Do we know what?
Yeah, so I mentioned it earlier, all the new families to Woodstock are all remote working and making choose wherever they want to be.
When we take a look at where they're coming from and the income, we have to remember affordability is a relative measure, and there are some states that are less affordable than Vermont. So if we can compete on affordability and sort of open up the viability of moving to Vermont for more people from more places, I think we'll see more progress here too.
Right. Every New Yorker and Bostonian who moves to Woodstock says, oh, it's so much cheaper here. It's like, wait, what planet is one? But that is their planet.
Well, I mean, I lived in Boston for a long time. I had a 2-bedroom apartment on Beacon Hill. It was $4,500 a month. I mean, it's.
And that was a while ago.
And that was, but it was a long time. I mean, it's all relative, right?
Yes.
It is, but however, I made 4.5 times more than I made then.
Yes, exactly. Oh, no, you're paying for that privilege of spending more money.
I did have to pay more my car. I towed every Tuesday, so there was additional costs in there too. It is what it is.
That's because you hadn't rented it to somebody who's coming up to me.
Yeah, my insurance company would have loved me.
Like I said, there is demand for Vermont, and the demand's coming from a younger cohort, and sometimes we just need to get out of our own way.
Do we know how we can continue to promote that and push it better than what, that's happening?
Yeah, I
What
think
can we-
there
what can we just not-
Yeah, I think there are strategies. We can leverage data in this way too. So I mentioned that Vermont has 1 job seeker for every 2 open jobs. That ratio, that data is available across the country. There are some labor markets where it's a lot more competitive, right? So one thing we can do is target messaging to a place where there are more job seekers than jobs available. Because people might move for opportunity. They might move for a job. The other thing that I think we can do is, I mentioned climate earlier. There are good maps on climate vulnerability. And if we know that there's a place where, let's say it's a coastal city and it might not be on the map in 50 years, maybe some people might want to make that move a little bit earlier. Or a place with chronic drought and wildfire, is considered Vermont.
Why I'm there.
Yeah.
I want some oceanfront property here. Yeah.
It was oceanfront property a long time ago.
It's coming back.
The west coast of New England.
Right.
Put that on a t-shirt.
It is encouraging to me, Kevin, that a lot, and I know we are over time now, so we should probably start wrapping, and thank you for joining us, but I think a lot of what you're talking about is, I do think aligns with what the board wants to work on, which is like bringing the groups together to have the conversations that need to happen, to develop messaging that is mutually reinforcing, informed by data, that I think comes from a lot of different sources, as well as the Futures Project. So we'd love to stay engaged with you as that work continues to get off the ground.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone ever wants more copies, just reach out. I've got too many boxes in my closet. My wife would be really happy if I got everything. So please, let me know.
Very, very, very.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see how you readjust this, for the groups that you're speaking to, which is great.
Tailor the message to the.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. So I always feel like I'm.
Sending lots of kudos from folks on the screen.
Oh, thank you.
And it's like,
Thank you, folks on the screen.
Yeah. Okay. Deb, thank you. Thank you. All right, next up on the agenda is the OWSD updates, but we want to just do this. It's great to end on Kevin, right? It's a really high note,
I don't
so.
want to bring down the happy feelings here, so
Okay.
we'll send you emails to keep you up to date.
Yeah,
on
we
it
can-
or not.
We can include our updates in the minutes. Yeah, we'll send out to you
Yeah.
all.
Perfect.
They're not half as interesting as my.
I guess the only thing that might be helpful to note now is we don't have another board meeting scheduled, so we're gonna work on scheduling the full board meetings for next year, probably quarterly. And then we'll, as we talked about, send some sort of format where folks can indicate which goals they're interested in working on. And then we'll be scheduling committee meetings as well.
Meetings, right.
So.
All right, that was just me sharing a digital version.
Oh.
Okay.
oh, to all of us?
It's in the chat now.
But for those of us who aren't in the chat now.
Those of us who are in the chat can
We'll
share
send
it with
it
those of us
around.
who aren't in the chat.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be very kind.
Yeah.
Like email it to.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
All right. Any other topics or things to discuss?
Oh, that's.
Anyone from the public joining us? Excellent. We get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second. Okay. Excellent. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
That's our new.
Wondering some.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.